Hello, and thank you, because once again, you're watching my video. Saw that I got 40 views on the last one. Might have been a fluke, is because, the chapter was on break last week. Maybe people were looking for that 1020 content, but if you're here again, thank you for coming back. Feel free to leave a comment, even if it's just to say, like, you suck and I hate you. I mean, I'd love to hear your opinions. If you think I'm doing a great job, I'd love to hear that too. But anyways, this video is going to be talking about a theory that's been in the community for a while now, but more specifically, kind of like my last video, using it to predict what's going to happen in the current arc of Wano-kuni. I don't know if I've seen a specific name for this theory, so it might be one that someone else has used before, but I've taken to calling it the One Piece mirror theory, and I'll just get right into it. This is not my theory. This has been passed around on Reddit, on YouTube, on various different circles of the One Piece community. Again, not my theory, but I am a person who believes in it. There are other sources where you can go, and they break this down in more detail, but I'm going to very quickly just kind of run through what this theory is and explain why I'm making this whole video, basically. So, the One Piece mirror theory is basically just that the current arcs that we've been getting, the post-time skip arcs, are mirrors or inversions of pre-time skip arcs. I'll give you a couple examples. So the first one is, I did say arcs, could be arcs and sagas, because my first example is the entire Romance Dawn saga. That is everything that happens in East Blue, from Luffy busting out the barrel to crossing into the Grand Line. That is mirrored in the post-time skip by one saga, two arcs, Sabaody, the return to Sabaody, I should say, and Fishman Island. So this one's pretty easy, pretty simple to understand. Romance Dawn is all about Luffy going out for the first time, gathering up his crew, going through adventures with his crew, and most specifically, ended with Logtown, but the big climactic moment at the end, or near the tail end of Romance Dawn, was Arlong Park. Luffy fighting against Fishman. And Return to Sabaody. The inversion of Luffy gathering his crew and going on an adventure for the first time is that Luffy is now picking his adventure back up. He's starting his adventure again after taking his 2-year break for training. And he, instead of gathering up his crew is already there waiting for him to rejoin them. And more specifically, the stronger end of this is the comparison of Arlong Park to Fishman Island. That Arlong, who hated humans because of the prejudice that he's seen firsthand, versus Hody Jones, who's been inspired by characters like Arlong, who hates humans, but hates them not because he's experienced Fishman racism, but just because he's been taught to hate them. I feel like that's one of the strongest points of comparison is Arlong Park to Fishman Island, but the broader stretch of Romance Dawn does compare quite well to the Return to Sabaody and Fishman Island. And the last point I'll make on that is, of course, crossing into the Grand Line over Reverse Mountain compares and inverts quite well from coming up out of the sea into the New World. So that's it for the first one. The second one, quite clear, again, is the Alabasta Saga, which is everything from the stuff we see with Laboon all the way to the end of Alabasta, where we leave Vivi behind, all the crew holds up their arms with the X, and everything that happens in between. This section does happen to include the majority, or actually the entirety, I should say, of the Skypiea saga, which is Jaya and Skypiea. And both Alabasta and Skypiea are mirrored by the Dressrosa saga and Zoe. Um, so of course, like the easiest thing to point to here is of course the Alabasta arc and the Dressrosa arc specifically, which is of course the most like famous example of this whole theory, which is where basically of course, Alabasta Crocodile's trying to take over the whole kingdom as a warlord, trying to subvert it from the inside, where, of course, Dressrosa Doflamingo, in a very similar manner, subverted the kingdom from the inside, but he actually succeeded in overthrowing the king. And there are other examples, too, throughout the earlier arcs, which is where we're picking up crew, we're picking up allies. In the pre-time skip, of course, we have Vivi and Chopper. In the post-time skip, we have Kinemon and the other samurai and Law. And there are other examples too. I'll move on. I don't want to spend too long on giving the examples here to set this all up. Skypiea and Jaya. Jaya compares more to kind of the tail end of Dressrosa, specifically the whole dreams, and the kind of inversion of that would be kind of Doflamingo's the will of D is the enemy of God and kind of stuff. It's a little more loose, not as concrete as some of the other stuff, but quite specifically Skypiea and Zoe is a very kind of fantastical departure where, of course, Skypiea, we go into the clouds, we have to have the sunny the Mary ride up the knock-up stream, whereas with Zoe, it's we have to climb up the elephant's leg. We meet an entire new race of people. In Skypiea, it's the winged people. Some people call them angels in the community. There's a couple other names for them, like the Birkins and all that stuff. Where in Zoe, of course, we meet the minks. Some more parallels there. Again, don't want to spend too long on these examples. I'm going to try and blaze through the last couple ones. Of course, we have up next in the pre-time skip is the Water 7 and Enies Lobby saga, as well as Thriller Bark, which is compared to just the Whole Cake Island arc. And so basically what it is here is consider, or I guess compare the kind of crazy nature of Thriller Bark, this island that's full of these like living creatures, trees with faces, animals that are moving around even though they shouldn't be, compared to Whole Cake Island, the homies, trees with faces that can talk, and they are the Straw Hats' enemies. Very strong parallels here. Also specifically, kind of a combo between CP9, Gecko Moria, and Bartholomew Kuma is just kind of Big Mom and her entire crew. And just this overwhelming force that takes pretty much everything the Straw Hats have. Of course, also in Whole Cake Island, we have Sanji leaving the crew and fighting with Luffy, where parallels very heavily with Usopp leaving the crew and fighting Luffy. And again, having to rescue Robin parallels very well with having to rescue Sanji. Gaining Frankie as a crew member, gaining Jinbei as a crew member. These things parallel very well. So all of this has been to say, all these examples I've been giving has been building up to the fact, again, to reiterate, that the post-time skip arcs are mirrors or inversions, very similar but also different, of pre-time skip arcs. Which now brings us, of course, to Wano-kuni, and, of course, what comes after the, the Water 7 Enies Lobby saga, but the Summit War saga. And again, these parallels are readily available. It's interesting, too, with Wano being broken up into acts, that the different acts act as parallels to pre-time skip arcs. So, first off, I'd like to talk about Sabaody, and Amazon Lily compared to Act 1 of Wano-kuni. Um, it is almost a complete inversion where, of course, Sabaody came first, then Amazon Lily, but Act 1 starts off much like Amazon Lily starts off, where Luffy wakes up, on the beach of Wano, wakes up on Amazon Lily alone and without his crew. He very quickly meets a native girl on the island who he befriends after a little bit of scuffle, and he starts to journey with them for a little bit. Learns about the native culture through them, and begins exploring more of the island. And again, that inversion of where we end Act 1 with Luffy getting one shot in the manga, and the anime is a little different, by Kaido, where, which is another way I should say that is maybe that Luffy suffers a major defeat. In Sabaody, Luffy suffers a major defeat at the hands of Kuma, and Kizaru, and the Pacifistas. So again, there's just very strong parallels that we can see here. Moving on to Act 2, Impelled Down compared to Act 2. Very obvious, of course, the prison setting. Of course, Act 2 does cover material that's outside of Udon, but Udon and Impelled Down are very obvious mirrors of each other. We do see through Luffy's time in prison in both of these arcs that he is able to break out of the prison, and in doing so gains numerous allies he did not have, which will be very useful and be very helpful to him in the upcoming conflict. And then plowing on through to where we are now in Act 3. Marineford compared to Act 3. This is even something that was stated even before we got here by editors of One Piece, who said that the Wano-kuni arc was going to make Marineford look small in comparison. And, I mean, as we've seen so far, we are just now getting started with the raid in the anime. For manga viewers, we've been in the middle of the raid for quite a long time now. And we've seen these these titanic clashes of so many characters fighting against one another, powerful named characters, and of course the obvious comparison is basically that Whitebeard is equivalent to Kaido, where they're both the heads of these crews who are involved in the war, but the inversion is that where Whitebeard invaded Marineford, Kaido is defending himself from an invasion. Again, it's this inversion of the pre-time skip to the post-time skip. But yeah, we're seeing Yonko commanders fight against important characters. We've even seen a betrayal. Instead of one character, in this case Squard, betraying Whitebeard, we have all of the gifters and the waiters and the pleasures who are starting to kind of change allegiances, some because of Tama's devil fruit, some because Queen's, just a real swell guy. We see betrayal. It's another parallel. So yeah, those are all the examples. That is the One Piece mirror theory as we are so far. As for the rest of this video, this is where we get into prediction territory. So right now, as I've already stated and given some examples for, is that Marineford is the inversion of Act 3 of Wano-kuni. We, I guess, need to look at the end of Marineford and start using that to predict the end of Act 3 of Wano. So the first thing I feel is important to talk about is, of course, who is the inversion of Blackbeard. My supposition is that Big Mom is the inversion of Blackbeard. The reason why I say this is because Blackbeard, after the events at Marineford, after the events of the Payback War, becomes a Yonko. So, although he was not a Yonko at the time, his actions at Marineford, putting his face basically in front of the entirety of the world, steals Whitebeard's devil fruit, and becomes a Yonko shortly after. Of course, there's the payback war, but, Marineford is what directly kind of led to those events, is that, he's a Yonko, basically, because of it. Whereas Big Mom is already a Yonko, maybe she's going to do something that will upset the balance of this war, that will kind of throw everything into a critical stage here. Maybe she betrays Kaido, because, as we can see, although they are old friends, they are not exactly good friends. And that we have seen them in conflict, more specifically, I would suppose, in the anime, that the two of them have fought. And, I mean, there you go. It's all predictions and suppositions, of course, but that maybe Big Mom is already, in a way, fulfilling that Blackbeard role, and that she might ultimately cause Kaido's downfall, either by maybe abandoning him, or betraying him, or maybe some other third thing that, we're not sure about. The second important character to try and pin their inversion to is, of course, Ace. Who is Ace's equivalent in this arc? Of course, major spoilers. Don't know why you'd be watching this if this is news to you, but Marineford, Ace dies. Is there going to be a major death that will affect us like Ace? I've said this before in a previous video. I'm all for Yamato for Straw Hat, but there is a very strong Ace-Yamato connection that's already been established. Is Yamato the Ace in this situation? Now, granted, that doesn't necessarily mean also that Yamato has to die, but it's more... Well, it's the inversion of Ace's trope. So, maybe Yamato tries to sacrifice himself for Luffy, but actually gets to live where Ace did not. It's just something to think about. Ultimately, I'm not convinced either way. It's something we will ultimately have to wait and see. But if I were to, proverbial gun to my head, I have to make a decision. I think that we might need to be prepared for the fact that maybe Yamato dies. The other inversion of that, maybe it isn't Yamato, but another character who's already been closely tied to Ace is Tama. Now, it's one thing, for a fighter like Ace or Yamato to die, but Tama is a child. One Piece is already very, very nervous about killing off characters. I don't even know if Oda would kill off Tama, but with Kabuki Plays, the third act usually ends in tragedy, which again mirrors very well with the ending of Marineford. So maybe it's Tama who's actually the inversion of Ace. And again, like I said previously, it is the inversion of Ace, so it doesn't necessarily have to follow that, Ace's inversion will die, but it's a possibility we might need to keep our eyes out for. And the final, most important thing to talk about here is, of course, the end of the Marineford War, and of course, Shanks intervening to stop it. At this point, I feel compelled to bring it up that there has long been speculation and theorizing that, maybe Blackbeard turns up at the end of this war to steal Kaido's devil fruit, and rather than be an inversion, it's pretty much just a repeat of Marineford, and then Shanks will again try and come and stop him. But I would like to push back on that a little bit, and as we've seen previously with this mirror theory, is that it's usually an inversion. It usually doesn't go exactly the same, which is why I don't believe, personally, that Blackbeard will be coming to Wano, I think he's got his sights set on somewhere else. Um, maybe it's Whole Cake Island while Big Mom is gone. Maybe it's Shanks directly. Maybe it's another country that we've never seen before. Maybe it's Fishman Island. Might know about Shirahoshi. There's a lot of options on the table. Doesn't necessarily have to come to Wano. He could. This is ultimately an option that's on the table, but I don't feel it's likely given the previous examples of this theory that we've seen. All of this, though, was to kind of bring around to, of course, if Blackbeard doesn't show up, then is Shanks also not going to show up? And in which case, what is a force great enough to potentially put a stop to this conflict? Going back on what I said, where Blackbeard's inversion of course, Big Mom. Again, maybe Big Mom decides to betray Kaido to ultimately disband their temporary alliance, kind of following what she's established with Perospero, that she has her own plan and she's not a sheep being led by Kaido, that she knows what she's doing and she's got something going on, and the Queen Mama Shanter is in Wano's waters. It's probably still at the bottom of the waterfall, but we have not seen it for a very long time. She has Smoothie on that ship. She has a lot of her powerful children on that ship. Not all of them, of course, but quite a few. Maybe the Queen Mama Shanter finally shows up after Kaido's been defeated. Whether it's by, Big Mom abandoning him to Yamato and Luffy, or Big Mom betraying Kaido herself. But ultimately what's going to stop Big Mom from finally trying to achieve her revenge on Luffy, who, theoretically, if he has beaten Kaido, how is he going to have the stamina and the strength left to stand up against Big Mom? There is another thing that's in play that I haven't talked about yet, and that is the Straw Hat Grand Fleet. Now, I know what you might be thinking. How can the Straw Hat Grand Fleet show up this late? But if you were a weekly reader at Marineford, how would you possibly predict that Shanks was going to show up? It's unexpected. It's crazy. I know, I get it. But hear me out. We've already seen, specifically with Ace in the Marineford arc, that your Vivre card is directly connected to your life force. A couple weeks ago in story time, Luffy got Thunder Bogwood by Kaido and got one shot and thrown in Udon prison. Do you think that maybe his Vivre card would have shown some of that damage to Bartolomeo and the other people of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet? Maybe. And do you think that again with Roof Piece, where once again, Kid and Killer go chase after Big Mom, and Zoro and Law, Luffy tells them, "You're in my way, get out of here," and then Luffy gets beat again and thrown off Onigashima. Do you think that would have shown damage on the Vivre card? Maybe. Maybe after that 2 weeks ago where Luffy got Thunder Bogwood for the first time, and the whole One Piece world saw in the newspaper that he was declared a 5th emperor after, winning against Big Mom. The Straw Hat Grand Fleet most likely knows that Luffy is in some shit right now. Maybe they've been on their way this whole time. We haven't been outside of Wano for so long, outside of the little cutaways we've had in the post-arc cutaways. Maybe they've been on their way. Maybe they show up. And while it probably won't be ultimately as epic as Shanks clashing with Akainu, it'll still be pretty freaking epic to see Barto and Cavendish and Hyrudine and the rest of the Grand Fleet roll up to cross their arms and stand behind Luffy Oyabun, and Big Mom might have to back away. Because ultimately, her forces might be a little worn out from the battle. She might be a little worn out from the battle, and with that many more, not negligible combatants, maybe she decides that she's going to go get her revenge in another way. ultimately get at this point getting into power scaling. I don't believe that the Straw Hat Grand Fleet poses a threat to Big Mom herself, but of course, I don't know how this arc is going to end. I'm just trying to predict the final story beats. Maybe something happens to Big Mom. Maybe she does suffer some damage, and maybe she's not at 100%. Who's to say? Um, ultimately, this has all been kind of wild speculation. Just applying this mirror theory to how the end of Wano might go. I'm not really sure. I guess all I have left to say is that, of course, if we are still following a 5-act structure of a kabuki play like Wano has seemed to be doing so far, is that um, Act 4 and 5 might be together kind of a parallel of the post Marineford arc, I suppose, if it can even be called that. Just that kind of wrap up where, of course, we saw the ASL flashback. We saw Jinbei telling Luffy, what is it you still have, and what happened to the crew, going into the time skip, and Luffy training with Rayleigh. Um, that might be a decent parallel for Act 4 and 5, that we see the world changing because of what happened at Wano-kuni. That we see that, ultimately maybe Luffy and the Straw Hats get to stay on Wano. They get to recover. They get to, emotionally cope with everything that's gone on in this raid. That they get to help heal Wano, and that, maybe through this whole experience we see them that they've been able to get stronger too. But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say. Again, like I said at the start of this video, if you have gotten to this point, you're still watching, thank you so much. Again, please feel free to leave a comment. Again, even if it's just to tell me, I hate you and I think you suck, I'm happy to hear it. Also, feel free to leave a like. If you want to see more stuff from me, subscribe. And most importantly, have a good one. Y'all take care.